Okay, so in this part I actually went ahead and created this graphical user interface that we can use. So in this part I'm just going to talk about the logic behind running all of the tests and running all of the tests at the same time using multi-threading. So let's go inside of our code. So as you can see, I already made a few changes. So the first change that we need to do is actually go back to our automation testing.cs project and include this library that I added. So after adding it, we go back to our program and we need to use two namespaces. The first one is openqa.selenium.support.ui and the second one is selenium extras.wait helpers. Okay, so after creating these two namespaces, I went ahead and created this rich text label object and initialized it inside of the ready function. And this test console variable is actually, if we go to our project and start it, the rich text label is actually a console that I created in here. So every time we actually want to print something, it's going to print inside of here instead in Godot. So let's go back. Okay, so in the first function, test1, it's the same function from the last time, from part 1. So I just made a few changes to it. So I deleted the start browser and close browser functions and just copied it inside of the main function, the test1. So let's see what changes I made. So again, we're going to create our driver. We're going to make it into Chrome driver. We're going to maximize a window and we're going to open Google page. Next, I created this WebDriver wait object, and what it's actually doing is just every time we want to actually find a certain web element, we want it to wait for 12 seconds before it will throw an exception. So again, we're going to create the search text web element, and now we're going to wait until the element is actually visible in the browser. So it's going to wait for at least 12 seconds until it will throw an exception. So after finding this specific web element, it's just going to send these keys inside the search text, and then it's going to click on the enter key, just like in the keyboard. So this is just replacing the search button inside of Google. Next, we're going to again create a variable for Godot web page using a web element, and then we're just going to click it. Next, we're going to find the download page for Godot and click it again. Then it's just going to wait for 6 seconds and it's going to run this function, the print to test console. So this function, I created it to actually print everything inside of the application. So every time we're actually going to print something, it's going to show up here. And I created two more tests. It's the same thing, just with different string in the end. And the rest of the code is actually just all of the buttons I created. So let's go one by one. So private void on test1 pressed, which is the first test button. So let's see what it actually doing. So system.threading.thread test1. So that means we're actually creating a new thread, a new process, so we can run this function, the test1 function, on a different process or a different thread. So we're actually doing it because if we run this function without creating a new thread, it's actually going to run it with Godot, with the main function. So if you try to run it without creating a new thread, it's going to crash the program when it's finished. So we're creating this new thread and just calling it dot start. So it's going to start this function. So we did it again for the two other buttons. So on test2 pressed and on test3 pressed, which are these two buttons. And I also created this button to run all of the tests at the same time. So in this function I'm actually using multi-threading. So when I press this button, it's just going to run all of the tests at the same time. And then I created a quit button, so it's just going to be this one, just to shut down the program. And I created this on delete log pressed, so just going to clear the console when I'm clicking this button. So let's start it. Let's run our first test, and it's just going to search for Godot game engine, open the web browser and go to the download page. It's going to wait for 6 seconds, close it, and as you can see the test has passed. So let's try it with the other test. So for the other test it's just going to do the same thing, but at the end it's just going to print the number of the test. So test2 is passed. Now let's delete it and let's run all of the tests at the same time. So as you can see, it opened up 3 browsers and it's actually doing the same thing for all of them at the same time. And when it's finished, it's just going to print for which test it finished. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more content, and I'll see you in the next video.